We already had one conversation short with a Muslim viewer in the comments. No, Muhammad was not perfect. He was not sinless. Adam was not sinless. Obviously, your own Quran supports that. King David, Dawood alayhi salam, he was not sinless.
No.
By any means.
By any means, yeah.
Moses, Musa, Moshe, he was not sinless. Abraham, Ibrahim was not sinless.
We come to your presence with thanks and awe. Our Father in heaven, this day is yours. Sing hallelujah.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to another episode of Firm Foundations with your host, CJ and Tony. And today we're in
Chapter 4. We're moving along now. I think we're going to be moving along a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're going to see some things, and I think we're going to learn about a few things with offerings and such in just this one chapter here and what happened. So let me go ahead and begin with verse 1. Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With help of the Lord, I have brought forth a man." Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept the flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord, but Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. He was not a happy camper with the fact that God liked Abel's offering more than his. Now we don't know how long. We don't know how much older Cain is than Abel. It just said later she gave birth. I'm guessing, a couple of years at least. Could be longer. And these are the first two born after the fall of man. And what drove them to believe that they had to give an offering to God? Because it doesn't explain that.
Yeah.
Why would they think about that? And explain why you think Cain was upset if he brought forth his offering in the same manner as Abel did. They both brought an offering, but his was, I guess, for lack of better words, cheap compared to Abel's.
Yeah. I don't think it was necessarily a cheapness, a value thing, but it's interesting. First of all, there's a few assumptions that we made going into this right now, the way we framed it, right, where we said they were born after the fall, that there's a couple years in between them, and it's interesting that the earliest commentators, the Jewish commentators, actually would say they were probably born in the garden and that they might have been twins, which is interesting to think too. That's like completely different, right? The way we read it.
The way it reads here, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting to see their thought process and what it would mean for the way we understand the fall even. And I'm still trying to process through that figure it out. Because all my life I had the same assumptions that, they were born outside of the garden after the fall, and, there was some time between them. And so,
Well, what would be the significance of them being born in the garden or out of the garden? And okay, and it says, later gave birth to a son. So instead of maybe a couple of years or whatever, then they're thinking maybe a couple of minutes.
a couple of minutes, maybe.
So that's
an hour.
later.
So, yeah, it's still later.
For twins, that would be, hey, I was born first, you were born later, although it was only 2 or 3 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
So, but what's the assumption of them thinking that they were born in the garden and not out of the garden, I guess?
Well, their assumption comes from the idea that everything happened the first day after Adam and Eve's creation. Meaning, on the 6th day, God created Adam. On the 6th day, Adam named everything, all the animals. On the 6th day, God revealed to him, oh, you don't have a suitable mate.
Mm-hmm.
On the 6th day, God made the mate. And then on the 6th day, somehow,
Be fruitful and multiply.
be fruitful and multiply. And the idea is, okay, so going back to chapter 3, where he says, you're going to give birth in pain, and I will multiply your sorrows. They say, oh, you know what? Before the fall, conception and birth must have been painless and must have been short, must have been very quick. Otherwise, what would it mean for him to multiply the sorrows of childbirth and pains of it? So it must have been, the same day before they ate of the tree and
Okay.
fell.
So Eve may have had Abel and Cain and Abel, which way, without pain, and now she's experienced the fact that she had them without pain. Now she's going to experience having children with pain.
Yeah. And that's interesting. But it also has ramifications for the children, right? Cain and Abel themselves, if they were born in the garden and they had not sinned.
Mm-hmm.
Just Adam and Eve ate and disobeyed. But they're now suffering the consequences with their parents.
Right. Well, because through Adam, all men now have that curse, so to speak.
Yeah. So it really doesn't change anything for us, but it does kind of create a cognitive dissonance with the idea that injustice was done to the kids.
Okay.
It just,
Thanks a lot, Dad.
yeah, and some might put that onus on God. Might say, well, see, God didn't have to kick Cain and Abel out of the garden, but he did. So, bad God. And I'm not in favor of that at all.
Well, is it like, the sins of the father fall on the children through a certain amount of generations?
Yeah, and again, that also depends on how we understand what that means, right? I always understood that he visited the sins of the fathers on the children to the nth generation as meaning that, now that he has committed this sin, he's going to watch the kids to see if they continue in it.
Right.
And, of course...
Generational curse.
Yeah, because there's the idea of the deeds of the father being a sign for the children.
Mm-hmm.
So, did they learn from their father's mistakes?
Mistake or not, right.
Which is interesting. Here's another interesting tidbit. When we talk about sin, right? The Hebrew word for sin is hata. But it also means mistake. And in Turkish and like other languages that borrowed from Arabic, which is from the same language family as Hebrew, it's always used as a mistake. So, did you learn from your father's sins? Did you learn from his mistakes?
Right.
If you haven't, guess what? Now you're gonna. But here, the kids aren't. That hasn't been observed in the kids yet, and they're kicked out anyways. So, I don't see how it meshes, and that's part of our program, right? Where we just discuss stuff and muse on it, and sometimes we leave it hanging. And I'm
Right.
going to leave that one hanging. And actually, while y'all are mulling over that, I'm going to.
Let's get into the fact of the offerings.
Yeah.
We always look at offerings, from the Old Testament as, slaughtering an animal and sacrificing it and so on and so forth. Abel brought, a lamb, which kind of, I wonder what that ties into, right?
Yeah.
But Cain brought vegetables. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, you got the meat, you need the vegetables, right?
Yeah.
But some people think that the fruit that Cain brought was not the best fruit that he had, was one of the problems.
Yeah.
And so he gave second best because he kept the best for himself or maybe for the family, whatever, and brought second best.
Yeah.
Which would have been unacceptable, of course, in that fact. But is it the fact that he didn't, and I don't know who he would have sold it to, but didn't sell off his fruit to buy a reasonable or accepted offering of a lamb or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. Earlier, you mentioned the fact that it's odd that they know to bring something to begin with,
Right.
and I think that goes back to the garden where God slaughtered an animal to provide clothing for Adam and Eve, and I think that's kind of where they learn. Oh, we can't. Because one thing we discussed was, Adam and Eve tried to fix the clothing issue themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to cover their
shame,
sin and
right.
shame through their own works. And God doesn't accept that. He says, no, I'm going to offer a sacrifice. I'm going to provide covering for your sins and your shame. And then we come to Cain and Abel, and they know this from that incident. And like you said, there's different ideas as to why Cain's offering was not accepted. And the rabbis actually came up with several ideas. One was it's probably lower quality, inferior quality fruits and vegetables or whatever it may be. And that's unacceptable, like you said. You don't give scraps to God. You give your best, and He blesses what you think are the scraps. And you end up in a more blessed place than you were initially, even though you've given the best to God. Another idea was that perhaps he brought flax to God. And the interesting thought behind that is the idea of the forbidden mixture of wool and linen.
Well, that wasn't considered a sin until after. So that's another thing, and I know I'm interrupting you. I'm sorry.
No.
The law wasn't a law, so to speak, until God gave it to Moses, and so everybody understood what they were allowed to do or what they were not allowed to do. And like you said, a Jewish person will not mix cotton and linen, right? or cotton or anything else, or linen and anything else. It's got to be the same. But they didn't know that back then, that we know of. I'm sure God could have told them, you can't do this, can't do that,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really emphasized until Moses.
Well, from our point of view, from us just looking at the text, we would come up with that because we're very, how would you say? Our thought of time is very linear, and we look at it. Oh, it's revealed in a linear fashion. It's revealed step by step over time, and it's like we sort of expect everything we see for the first time
Right.
to be the first time it was said.
And I know I'm going to ruin what I just said, but it's just like murder. Murder, of course, they didn't understand murder until the first one, and they didn't know it was sin until he committed it, I guess. Or maybe he knew before, but everybody could have been murdered from all of Genesis,
Yeah.
but it wasn't considered a sin or wasn't written down to until Moses wrote it down, thou shalt not murder.
Yeah.
Or yes, thou shalt not murder. There's the difference between murdering and killing, but
Yeah.
we'll get to that later. So I know I'm almost like contradicting myself. I understand that here is murder, and we know it's bad because he's going to get the punishment for it. But like you were saying,
Yeah.
it may be it's just a linear thing where
Yeah.
so now from this point on, it's we understand it, but going back,
Yeah.
there had to be an understanding, right?
Yeah.
Of certain things.
And that's the idea. If you would ask a rabbi, he'd most likely say, God is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Mm-hmm.
So he would have communicated his standards to people at the very beginning. But the idea, going back to the text, right? The idea is that God didn't want Abel's sacrifice, which had wool, to be mixed with Cain's sacrifice that had linen, which I see where the idea is coming from and how it's developing, but I don't think that was it. I think the real issue stems from Cain having the same idea that his mother and father had when they first sinned, meaning I am going to cover up my own sins.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to cover my own shame. Because if you think about it, when Adam and Eve fell, what was said? What was part of the punishment? That the land would be cursed.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that it would, you would have to wrestle with it. It would not be easy to grow food from the land.
Right.
But there was no curse on animals. So, when it says Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground, it's reminding us to look back to there and say, oh, so Abel chose to live in God's blessing where there was no curse by raising animals and taking care of them. And even though they weren't eating meat, there was the wool, there was the milk,
Mm-hmm.
stuff you could use to sustain your life. Whereas Cain chose to ignore God's curse upon the earth. Not only ignore it, but to wrestle with it and to overcome it. Like, I am going to wrestle with God and I'm going to win against God. I'm going to impose my will on the earth. And the earth is going to yield unto me the basic necessities of life. So when he comes with that to God, it's like saying, you said it was cursed, but here.
Yeah.
Kind of
Let me
like,
prove you wrong, right?
kind of like in your face, what you gonna do now? And that's why God rejected his offering. Because if you think about it, even in the Mosaic law, there's grain offerings that go with the meat offerings.
Right. There's offerings of all types.
Yeah.
You have drink offerings,
Yeah.
you know, so it's
And
not that one thing is cursed over the other.
Yeah.
It's more of a heart thing,
yeah,
you know, really, you know, or, you know, why are you offering this?
yeah,
You know, is it because you're wanting to please me, or are you just offering it because that's what I have to do?
yeah,
You know, it's almost like it's almost like tithing. You know, God loves a joyful giver.
yeah,
Now, when you tithe, are you glad to give that money? You know, the tithe that God demands, 10%.
yeah,
You know, are you doing it because, well, here, you know, there you go, have your money. I hope you're happy, and that's kind of what I feel you're saying about Cain. Fine, here's some bananas. You know,
yeah.
they're bruised, but here you go.
It's that, but then there's more than that. It's
Uh-huh.
also like, I have beat you. I have bested you. Your curse has no power on me. It's the same thing that we do today when we reject Jesus Christ and we say, no, through my own goodness, I'm going to make it to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to force my way into your house, oh God, because that's how swell and powerful I am, and you're lame. I don't accept Jesus. I don't accept your sacrifice. Like, okay, let's see how that works out. It's not gonna.
It's not going to be a happy ending.
And also, it's interesting. Now, switching gears a little bit, but the names, you know, Cain means acquired. It means acquisition,
Mm-hmm.
and Abel means breath and vanity, and it's almost like Eve, since she named both of them, it's a little prophetic in one sense. First of all, calling Abel a breath or a vapor, it speaks to how short his life would be. And, you know, there's that aspect. On top of that, she's kind of belaying a lesson of life that many people don't ever learn, and that's all your acquisitions, everything you earn in life, that you build in life, it's vanity, it's vapor, it's here today, gone tomorrow. I don't know. Any ideas on that?
No. No, I don't. So Cain was angry with his face was downcast, almost like a jealousy and a prideful event there. You know, it's like, you know, mine is just as good as his. It may not have been the best, but it's still just as good as his. You know, and God basically rejects it. You know, and we're going to see in a little bit what he says about it. But I think a lot of pride has just come into Cain. You know, where it's like you're saying, I tilled the ground, I proved you that I could do it, and still bring vegetables and fruits and whatever. So this should be good enough because I did it on my own.
Yeah.
It's sort of like what you're saying there. So then verse 6, then the Lord said to Cain, why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it. That says a whole lot in there.
I'm sorry. Can we go back to verse 3?
Yes, we'll let you this one time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Here it says, and in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to the Lord. The interesting thing is that I was just reminded of is that where it says in the process of time, the exact Hebrew phrase would be translated also as at the end of days, which is interesting. It brings our attention. So in one passage, it's taking us back to the garden and saying, remember how your own efforts couldn't cover your sin and shame?
Mm-hmm.
Cain and Abel. Cain is going to find out that his efforts cannot cover his sin and shame. But also at the end of days, when we come face to face, your good works, your goodness, your effort is not going to cover your sin and shame. You need an offering made by God. You need an offering that only God can provide to make things right between you and me. And let's just make that clear.
Mm-hmm.
In the end of days, whether it's our own personal end of days or it's the final day, judgment day, the great and terrible day of the Lord, we will have to give an account. And our account cannot be justified by our presumed goodness. There we go. Our good works, our good deeds. We're supposed to do good works. We're supposed to do good deeds. We're supposed to reflect the goodness of God.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think a lot of people get that confused with. It talks about our goodness is like filthy rags.
Yeah.
And so people think, well, what's the point of doing anything good? Well, that's not what he's saying. It's just a comparison between us and God. But even Jesus said, that we need to do good to each other.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference when you were talking about that. And people get that. It's like, well, if I can't do anything, if it's just filthy rags, what's the point? The point is we're supposed to do good deeds.
Yeah.
Okay? It's not that our good deeds are not worth anything. They are worth, because that's how we build our treasures in heaven.
Yeah.
If you so desire. Now, if you want to go around and say, I did this for this person and I did this for that, well, you've just received, and I know I'm getting way ahead of here, but I just feel like people need to understand we have good deeds in us. And because we have Christ in us, we want to do those good deeds. And we want to bless other people with what we can do, with what we have, to bless them so that they can see Christ through us. And, that's just, I just didn't want people to get that too confused with good deeds and deeds compared to God himself.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're supposed to do good, but we're supposed to do good while understanding that our relationship with God is not based on those good deeds. We're invited into God's house, God's home, through a relationship with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we bring out our treasuries of good deeds and present it to him, it's an offering of love, it's an offering of worship, not an offering of pride. And that's the difference. And I love how it subtly hints at that. And we just read over it so many times and not even realize that there's something going on here, even in that simple phrase. But all right, going back to
if you do what is right, will you not be accepted? So, there right there, I mean, it says, that we can do right, even back then. You have the ability to do right. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. And this is a leeway of you're presented in a situation that you can either sin against God or take the way out that God provides.
Yeah.
Because there's always a way out of sin. It may cost a lot, it may cost nothing, but you've got to make that determination. Do you want to please God or do you want to please flesh?
Mm.
And that's the basics of it right there. And Cain was given this opportunity.
Yeah.
You've got the ability to do it the right way.
Yeah.
I've given you the ability. He could have just asked Abel if he could have one of his lambs to sacrifice.
Yeah.
That simple. And I would think Abel would say, sure, here you go, because that's what a brother in Christ would do, or a brother back in those days. They didn't know Jesus back then, of course, not the way we do, but I think his heart was in the right place where he would have given him an animal to sacrifice.
Yeah, and since we're in Passover season, I'm thinking about the Passover lamb as I'm thinking about this also. Is the Passover lamb was offered one lamb per household, and if the household was too small to be able to eat the whole lamb that night, they were told to share it with their neighbors.
Right.
Bring them in, all stay in the same house for the evening and eat together. And like you said, Abel probably would have done the same thing. Not only given him one, but if he had no other perfect lamb or whatever animal it was, if he had only one perfect lamb, he could have said, let's offer this together.
Right.
And if Cain did not have the pride that he had, it would have been a beautiful thing. And that's, ain't it interesting that the good deed or the bad deed that God is referring to here when talking to Cain is his pride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's...
But at the end of this verse 7, it says, but you must master it. So God's not going to step in and interfere with your choice, because that's not how he created us. He wants you to have the choice of loving him or not.
Yeah.
It's not a well you're not going to make it here, so let me butt in and help you out. That's not how it works. He gives you the way out, and you have the freedom of choice.
Yeah.
Because if not, then he may as well just made robots.
Yeah.
Just here we are. We're going to serve you, and that's it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no robot was ever saved through a relationship. But yeah, it's interesting because early in my walk with the Lord, I would read verses like, "Be holy, for I am holy," and like, oh, so it's possible for us to be holy and live a perfect life. We just got to do it. And
Yeah.
This verse like this, and pastors and teachers would get aggravated with me because, like, no, we can't be perfect. I mean, we're all sinners. And I would wrestle with them, and I would infuriate them, frustrate them, because I was looking at it and understanding it in one way, but they did not have the words to articulate it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not saying that we're perfect. We're not saying that we can live holy lives outside of the blood that we have claimed upon our lives. outside of Jesus Christ. We're not. He is the only one that is completely sinless, perfect. No prophet, and I'm saying this to my Muslim friends out there. We already had one conversation short with a Muslim viewer in the comments. No, Muhammad was not perfect. He was not sinless. Adam was not sinless. Obviously, your own Quran supports that. King David, Dawood alayhi salam, he was not sinless.
No,
By any means.
by any means, yeah.
Moses, Musa, Moshe, he was not sinless. Abraham, Ibrahim was not sinless. No one is sinless other than Jesus Christ. So what does it mean, be holy for I am holy? What does it mean when he says to Cain, overcome it?
We have the ability. It's the flesh that overpowers the spirit man.
Yeah. In God we have in God, through the Spirit of God, we have the power to withstand, resist, and to put the evil one to flight. But we don't.
But, you know, let's take, for instance, when you're first saved. Okay, now you are sinless because God has provided us an escape and sacrificed his own son. So now we're completely sinless. Now, if you are so strong and capable, you could finish out the rest of your life holy. But because of our weakness of the fleshly man, you know, we don't go that route. We always, well, I won't say always, but oftentimes we desire to satisfy the flesh.
Yeah.
And it's not because of imperfection, I would say. I would say it's more or less the lack of the ability to control. You know, our spirit man is building constantly every day if you feed it correctly.
Yeah.
Reading through the word, prayer, you know, all that. We have the ability to become holy and remain holy. But because of the fall of man, that sin continues to wrestle with our flesh. Yeah. And our flesh wrestles with our spirit man. And you know, it's a constant battle. And
yeah.
we fail. And I don't know if I've told you this before, but I've told plenty of people, it's like, I want to be completely holy where I never make any more sin. But at the same time, I don't, because then I would probably start allowing pride to get in and thinking, I don't need Jesus. I'm holy now. Yeah. So, and you see that in some people, you know, David Koresh, what's that one that, there are several people that claim to be Jesus. So if they're Jesus, then that means that they're completely sinless, right? So, you know, so in a way, my thinking is I don't want to be completely perfect if my flesh sneakily starts being prideful and thinking I don't need Jesus anymore because I'm perfect.
And see, part of the reason why this resonates with me so much is because I know how much pride I have. Mm-hmm. And so, like you, I'm faced with the same, idea, same thought, but then I have to say, you know what? I already have too much pride. I already have to wrestle with it. So, God, give me the strength to wrestle with it all, and I want to be more like you every day. And yes, I know that there's going to be some serious pride issue. Help me overcome that also.
I think pride is the major thing that gets us all to sin.
Yeah.
No matter whatever the sin is, I think pride has the very beginning of each sin.
Yeah.
it did for Lucifer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that reminds me, I don't know how.
I don't either.
If you're being blessed through our conversations as we work our way through the Bible, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Right now, take a second and like the video. Don't wait, because it helps us. It helps you. Hopefully, the more you like, the more YouTube will show you and show your friends these videos. Hopefully, we can bring glory to God and help to the brethren. But yeah, so it's like boxing. When you're in the ring, you're boxing. Let's say you come out of the gate swinging. You're aggressive.
Firstborn. Well, born again. I'm sorry. Born again.
Exactly.
You come out.
You come out swinging, but guess what? You don't have the conditioning, so it said you're gassed out, right? What does that mean? You're tired. You wore yourself out. And that's when you fall. That's when you sin again. Now what happens now? Now you're not holy as he is holy.
Mm-hmm.
So you repent again. Now you're holy again. And because of Christ's holiness being applied to you. And it's a daily struggle.
Right.
It's for me, it's a minutely struggle.
I like your boxing analogy. And Christianity is it's sort of like a sport. Okay? And if you want to be good at a sport, what do? You practice, and you practice. Even the best people, the best sports players, boxing, baseball, hockey, whatever, they have to continuously practice in order to get better and better and better. And even if they're the best, like I can probably guarantee you that when Muhammad Ali was a boxer, after he won his first bout, he didn't stop practicing. Yeah. He continued to exercise and work it. And that's what we do when we read his word, is we're exercising our brain. When we're conversing with other Christians, we're practicing, and all that. I think that's a really good analogy that you brought up about boxing. It's a practice. It's to continuously building up your strength in God's word, so that you can be as holy as possible, and accept the fact that you're going to fail. Doesn't mean you've completely lost. It's just you struck out. A baseball player does not quit if he strikes out at bat. He comes back and tries again. Yeah. And it's as long as the heart is in the right place, And do you fail at the same thing? Yes, many times. And and God knows that. He knows your heart, that you want to do better. And He's going to give you the strength if you ask.
Yeah.
That's. Yeah. Have we covered that pretty good? I think so. Let's move on to verse 8. Now Cain said to his brother Abel, "Let's go out to the field." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Premeditated murder. I mean, apparently he asked him to go out there for a certain reason. And he attacked him and killed him. Now notice it didn't say he murdered him. It says he killed him. Now, unless,
I mean, it doesn't have to say he murdered him, because the act is obvious. It's not self-defense,
right?
And the Hebrew is a little more malleable, I guess you could say, in one sense. It's not as clear, so you can look at it from several different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But one idea is that It's interesting that you brought up the idea of premeditated murder, right? Because he says, let's go out to the field. Well, on face value, there's Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, no one else. Right? And
That we know of.
that
Well, no other brothers. Now, they may have had sisters. It doesn't say that, but anyway.
Exactly.
Go
And
ahead.
again, if you've been following along in our previous episodes, we talk about, different
Possibilities.
human species that humanoid species, I should say, that existed in history that we know of. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about strictly the face value reading of the Bible so far. Is that there's only 4 people. And apparently Adam and Eve are not in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So Cain calling his brother out to the field, to the place that was cursed by God, to the place that Cain fostered, fed, nurtured his pride and ego. And he says, let's go out there where there's nobody else. Nobody can see. Nobody will know. I mean, that's premeditation right there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So, verse 9, the Lord said to Cain, where is your brother Abel? I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? Boy, you hear that a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
Even nowadays, what am I? Why is that person my concern? It doesn't have to be your direct brother. It's anybody. Why? What do I care?
Yeah. One of my mom's favorite sayings was, "Not my circus, not my monkey."
Mm-hmm.
But this is another one of those passages that skeptics like to bring up to ridicule God. Like, oh look, he knows everything, but he didn't know what Cain had done to Abel. If you want to take it that way, be my guest. But if you want to be honest with regards to what's going on in the text,
Mm-hmm.
if you want to show fidelity, you have to realize that God here is doing the same thing that he did with Adam and Eve in the garden.
Mm-hmm. It's a
Who told you?
It's a hypothetical question. He knows. He already knows. So it wasn't you killed your brother.
Like, I don't know if your parents ever did it with you, but it's something I do with my son a lot. Like, did you do this? Did you say this? Or, what'd you do? I already know what he did.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm giving him a chance to own up to it. I'm giving him a chance to show remorse. I'm giving him a chance to be honest and restore a tear in the relationship. And that's what God's doing. He's given Cain a chance to come around. But as we're going to see, Cain, as we already have seen actually, Cain is so far gone that he's I'm not fessing up, I'm not owning up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a dangerous place to be. I hope and I pray that none of us are ever found in that place where we are staring something dead in the eye and saying, nope, it's not true. Nope, we didn't do that. Nope, I have no clue what you're talking about. as some would say, man up, fess up.
Right.
Yeah.
Verse 10, the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. When you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." So, we see, of course, God knew what happened, and explain his brother's blood cried out. Is there anything in the Hebrew text that explains what that means? His brother's blood cried out, because we know, blood doesn't cry out, of course.
I mean, again, yes, it's floral language. It's poetic language, and that's how we're supposed to take it. We're not supposed to take as little bloods of drop going. Me. But the interesting thing is the Hebrew word for blood here is actually in the plural, and what we gather from that is that he who kills one man has killed a whole world, they say. And he who saves a life saves a whole world. The idea is, if Abel had lived, he would have had children, grandchildren. Now they're all dead before they even began.
Mm-hmm.
And so in Revelation, we have that picture of the saints that were slain crying out to God, "When will you avenge our death?" And that's tied to this idea where all those who would have been born are crying out, "You stole our life. He stole our life. He stole our chance to be."
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to avenge us? What's the same idea as what happened if Cain and Abel were born in the garden and they were kicked out of the garden with their parents. What about us? We didn't eat of the tree.
Right.
But because of you, now we're suffering. And same thing with, can I get into the weeds? Do you have permission?
Sure.
That's one of the reasons why I am pro-life, not pro-choice.
That's both of us, by the way.
Yeah. When you take an unborn child's life for your convenience, whether you're the mom or the dad, because sometimes women get abortions because of the father. I fully recognize that. But when you do that for your own convenience, not because it's a life-threatening issue for the mother or whatever, because less than
1%, I think.
Less than 1% for sure. I was trying to remember if it was less than 0.1%, to be honest. But less than one. Go ahead.
And I'll mention his name because I think I'm allowed to, because I'm taking something from him. Charlie Cook. He does a really good job of explaining to people about abortion and why isn't it right or wrong, and he gets to the fact that people say, well, they were raped or incest or whatever, and he'll say to the crowd, well, okay, which one of them here was a victim that is a child of rape or incest? Can you tell me which one it is? And what he's saying is that everybody's the same. No matter how you came into this world, you are a person. You are a being that
Yeah.
God has allowed to be created. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I would have lost that thought if,
Yeah, no.
if I hadn't said it. But, and he explains it very well. And there's even more than that. And I think he said 0.01. And Charlie Kirk, if I said that wrong, forgive me. I think he said 0.01 was a percentage of life-threatening.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, I mean, I get it. If you have to choose between a mother and the baby, unborn baby, whose life do you save? I do not want to ever have to make that choice,
Mhm.
but I understand that choice. I understand, you know what? You might want to save the mother. That's perfectly understandable. But if you're doing it just because I don't want to ruin my life, having a child doesn't ruin your life.
No.
There are plenty of people that raise their kids and have a career, that raise children and have demanding jobs like being a doctor, a surgeon. There's having a child doesn't preclude you from following your dreams, unless your dreams are to party like a rock star, live without consequences, do whatever you want because you think you know better than the author of life himself.
Mhm.
And when you murder your own unborn child, you're murdering everyone that would have ever existed through that child. I know people that have had abortions, and it changes them fundamentally.
Yeah, they have a very remorseful life after that.
And some go the other route where they become even hardened, more hardened than they already were in their heart. And it ruins their relationships, even the relationships that have nothing to do with that unborn child. You know, even people that have no idea of what happened through other reasons, because of the hardness of their heart, they become more easily offended. They become more easily angered. They become more easily just... If you are able to murder your own child, you are that much more willing to cut somebody else out of your life and forget about them. Even your best friend, even your own mother and father,
Mm-hmm.
even your own brothers and sisters, over the smallest little thing. So yeah, the blood cries out.
I know we could go on for hours on that, and we'll probably cross that line again. So let's move on. You know, the last thing he says, verse 12, is when you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. So, and then you will be a restless wanderer on the earth. So apparently, his profession is
Yeah.
it's been cut. I don't care if you plant a million seeds; it's not going to produce because you have just cursed yourself,
Yeah.
and now you just completely wander throughout. You know, I guess he had to eat what he could find.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
it's poetic justice, right? God hits Cain right at the root of the problem, which is his pride. The thing that he took pride in the most is taken from him. And that kind of hits home for me also, because I used to could sing a little bit. I used to have abnormal strength in my legs and my back, even without having worked out.
That's because you were a Marine.
Well, even before that, and it was interesting because I was never that big of a guy. It was just like people would always say, "Oh, you're stronger than you look," when they see me carrying a china cabinet by myself, like. And I took pride in those things, and guess what? God, through the Marine Corps, took, that pride from me because I have back issues. I have knee issues. My voice is altered because of surgeries. To save my life, I had to make a choice. Am I going to keep my semi-decent singing voice, or am I going to, allow something that could potentially hurt it? And, well, I think we can conclusively determine that, yes, I chose life over singing. And that's the thing. God will hit you where the root of the sin is. And it's not because he hates you.
No.
It's not because... While I was reading this, I was reminded of that verse, several verses really, in one in Proverbs, one in, trying to remember, in the New Testament, in one of the epistles. It says that God disciplines, chastises the ones he loves. If you're not chastised, then you're not a son, but you're of course, in English translation or any translation of the Bible, we tend to make it sound a little less than what it is. We sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
We try to use certain phrases and
Want to hurt somebody's feelings?
And we try try to not use certain phrases that we associate with vulgarity. But it says if you're not disciplined, then you're a illegitimate son. And you can guess the B word that I'm referring to. Excuse me. So.
And that's B-A, not B-I. Okay.
Yeah.
But that's right there.
But that is the word used in the Greek, if I'm not mistaken. And the idea is, if God didn't care, if you weren't his son or daughter, he would let you be. Ruin your life even more. Who cares? But he will punish you in order to bring you around, to restore you, to teach you so you can be a better you and have a better relationship with him.
Okay, well, so Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." So, so now his life dream job is gone, and one of the saddest things in this verse is the fact that his presence will no longer be with God.
Yeah.
And this is a reflection of people who don't accept Christ and end up going to hell. The pain of the flames and torment and such is great, but I think the greatest pain will be the separation from God himself, because you no longer have that hope. And there's argument about, well, God is everywhere, and don't want to get into it too much the fact, if God is everywhere, God is in hell seeing this. Well, even if he is, they cannot see him. They cannot feel his presence. They can't see his presence. They can't hear his presence. It's a complete cutoff. It's like being in a pitch black room by yourself for the rest of your life, not hearing anything. So this here, Cain is saying, this is more than I can bear, being hidden from your presence. And then he's going to be a restless wanderer, and whoever finds me will kill me. So we've got two people now that have the ability to kill him, which is his mother and father, which that isn't going to happen. There's more people going to be involved in here. Where do they come from?
Yeah.
There's a lot of presumptions, a lot of theory. How old is Cain now compared to the brother that's fixing to come, and sisters and so on and so forth? Are they going to take revenge on a person that they never knew, Abel, and kill their brother Cain, or God created Adam and Eve, which I believe were the first people, and put them in a garden for a purpose, but it doesn't say that he did, and it doesn't say he didn't create more people outside the garden to populate the earth. It's just that Adam and Eve were the first, and they were a special people. Let's just call them Jewish, okay? And I'm just saying that because God chose the Jews. Just go along with it.
All right, let's roll with it.
And so you have them, and then on the outside you have other people that he may have or may not have created. It's really irrelevant to salvation, but like the show is, we try to look at things, the possibilities, because it wouldn't make sense, any greater sense for his brothers and sisters who never knew Abel to come and kill him to take revenge.
Yeah.
Not that they wouldn't, because he killed his own brother, but it plainly states that, whoever finds me will kill me. Gives the possibility of other people being created by God, and there just are in other regions outside the garden.
Other people, whoever?
Exactly. Who would they be?
Yeah, and that's where, again, I'm going to fall back on the idea that the fossil record and our own DNA, our own genetic code, testifies to the existence of other hominins that existed at the same time as humans. Modern, anatomically modern, I guess is the scientific term used. And I guess that's the other people, whether it's the Neanderthals or the Denisovans or the Homo floresiensis or whatever the case may be. One thing that strikes me more than that is because, like you said, like you repeatedly say in every episode, these things, they don't determine our salvation. These are side issues that, if you're a nerd like me, you like to wrestle with. You like to
take in all the possibilities.
Yeah, because I don't like holes in my arguments. I don't like holes in a narrative. There are just things that, if it's not making sense, I have a problem with it, and I want to wrestle with it. And we know that the Word of God isn't nonsensical. We know that the Bible is a self-contained unit, and there's no contradictions, and there's no logical flaws in it. So how do we make sense of certain things when those things come up? And that's why when we first started discussing the idea of starting this channel and doing these Bible studies together. One thing we talked about was to look at things from all these different angles, because, you know, the more you know, and the more you understand, the more you wrestle with the Word of God, the more it sinks into you, the more blessed you are. And I want all the blessings I can get. But one thing that really strikes me, going beyond the question of who are these other people, is the fact that he says, "Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground." And with that one sentence, or that first clause of the sentence, he is taking us back to the Garden of Eden. He is experiencing this, and that's why I don't think that, contrary to the sages of Israel, that everything happened within the first day of humans' creation, the sixth day, because he's looking back, and for the first time that we know of, he's experiencing the same feelings, the same realization that Adam and Eve experienced in the garden when God drove them out.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, especially these early chapters, it's like a wave that keeps crashing in. It keeps taking us back. Keeps taking us back to the garden and our expulsion from the garden. And basically what it's saying is, we all in our lifetime experience the same experience, where we are expelled from the presence of God, or we come to the realization that we are not in the presence of God, and we realize there's a emptiness and a sadness, more than a sadness, a despair from being alienated from God. And yeah, just keeps coming back. And again, if you're being blessed, if you want to know more, if you haven't liked it yet, please like the video. Please share it. Please comment. We would like to engage with you, answer any questions you might have as time permits, as in the course of time, as it said earlier in the chapter, yeah.
So we will conclude on this here, and then we'll pick back up on next episode in verse 15. But it's, overall, this has shown a lot of comparison between what's happening here and then what happens in the life of Christ, and how things happen and come about. And Judas could be mixed in with this, and his life, and him being cursed for what he did, because he basically killed Christ in a sense.
Yeah.
And now he is separated from God.
Yeah.
So, and Jesus, like Abel gave a sacrifice of a lamb, Jesus was our sacrificial lamb.
And where did Judas betray Jesus?
Oh, in the garden, yes. Mm-hmm.
We keep coming back to the garden.
So hang with us. we're I know we cover a lot of stuff. Like you said, the reason is because we don't like holes, and we may not be able to fill those holes completely, but we want to give you what we've got, and maybe you've got an answer for us. Maybe they've got something to say. Hey,
Yeah.
this is going to fill that hole for you.
Yeah.
And we'd love to hear it. Maybe in another episode or two, we can compilate some questions, and we can just do a answer the questions episode. I know my son has questions, his friends have questions, and look forward to answering those. Other than that, this is Passover weekend, and we know that, of course, this episode will be past that, but in our hearts, we hope that you all are blessed this weekend, remembering that Christ suffered and died for us and rose again on the third day. And, this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about.
Yeah. It really is. So, Hag Pesach Sameach.
Yeah, what he said. Y'all be blessed.
Happy Passover. And I hope you experience the resurrection.